Okay. Hello. My name is Benjamin Boyce, and this is another episode of Expose Evergreen. This is going to be a nice long episode, so I suggest that you get yourself an old-fashioned or one of those mottled drinks, like a julep or something like that, and just let me show you some things. So I'm going to show you some footage, about 5.5 minutes of footage from the Evergreen protests in May of 2017. And this episode and these clips are about a professor named John Baumonk. Now, John Baumonk was made famous by this pretty cool YouTube guy named PSA Snitch, who made a video called 0 to 60 or something like this. This is the professor who pointed a finger at his union representative while he's surrounded by a bunch of protesters and whining little teachers and faculty throwing each other under the shortest green bus imaginable. And anyways, so John was thrown out of the room for pointing his finger at his union representative. And then 2 days later, on May 26th, he was called out in a meeting with George and the student body. Now, George, in the second part of these videos, George had just read this statement that went through like some percentage of the demands of the students. So there's way too many demands for him to address every single one. But at the end of this meeting, then there was a Q&A or just like a kind of shout into a microphone session. And John Baumonk was called out again. And he was called out again at the end. Called out for doing something entirely inappropriate and making everybody in that room feel unsafe. So here's the video. And then why I'm doing this is because I finally got a document that I've been waiting for. And no, Evergreen did not give me this document. Fortunately, when you start talking about things, people will agree with you. Sometimes people in power, and people in power will hand you things off the record that you can put on the record, right? So I have my very own deep throat in Evergreen or in Virence. And I have the documents that go through and detail the findings that this actually independent review, this lawyer came down from Seattle and investigated John Baumonk for pointing his finger at his union representative. Yes, they hired a Seattle lawyer to travel into Olympia and spend a few months investigating this thing. So who knows how much money they spent on this, but I'm sure that there was some law where they had to actually hire somebody to do this and not just some sort of ramshackle external review board that's picked directly by the president of the college. No, but an actual lawyer who doesn't have any relations or conflicts of interest with the college came down, investigated Baumonk. That's the document I'm going to read, and then a couple of other documents connected to that. So that is a rambly preamble. Here's the video.
First of all, Tamiko, I did not witness what happened.
I know it's not that. I know you didn't witness it, but still,
I did the best. And I did the best I could. And
you just kept your mouth shut the whole time.
No, what I did, Tamiko, was I worked with you to make you feel as welcome as possible in that program. And
I didn't feel welcome because I never came as you saw, so
right.
That didn't work.
But I
just keep going, John.
So there's other incidents that I've also observed and am aware of. And I'm just going to let you know, I've brought those to the attention of the administration. Okay, I have brought them to the attention of the administration. I feel very bad about those. And you might not believe me, but I have them. They're documented. And if anyone wants me to share that documentation, I'm more than happy to do so.
Please do.
Some of those are those are in emails, which are public documents, which you can request. First of all. Second of all, there was a posting on Greener Commons about segregated seminar sections. Anybody see that? All right, so that occurred last spring, and then there is a police investigation that occurred in the program I was in last year, and involved a student of color. And so I've observed this stuff, and I've brought it to the attention of the administration
What have you done
at the
beyond
time. Well, the thing is, what can I do? I mean,
Are you willing to testify on our behalf of a lawsuit were to come
I'm
up?
willing to talk about
Can
my
everybody get
experience.
that on
I'm willing to
video?
talk about my experience here,
Okay.
because I've had experiences here where I've brought things to the attention of the people that are in a position to make those changes. All right, I'm not, but I brought that to the attention of the people who are in the administration or are in a position to make those changes, and I want to see those changes made. I want to be constructive about this. I don't want to tear down people. I want to try to build up people. And the last thing I want to mention is that last year when the Coming Together series was discussed among the new faculty, I also brought up the need for training as well. I didn't feel that the Coming Together series, those were speakers, those were not trainings, and I made that point abundantly
As a faculty of color, I need to address this issue.
Okay.
And I think you are taking a lot of space. First of all, as a minority
Hell
of
yeah.
color, as a faculty member of color, you personally addressed and challenged me at my office door saying, why didn't we as a union protect you when we did our best to defend you and address your concerns, and yet you come to a faculty member of color and charge her for not protecting your needs. So I refuse to listen to you grandstand and co-opt this student meeting. That's what I have to say.
Get out! You're not helpful. Get out!
Can you listen to your shirt?
Get out.
Milkshake and chill. You need to go. I feel like you just.
This is the kind of shit we put up with, George.
No.
And you just saw that.
You saw that.
How do you feel?
George, you cut him a paycheck.
John, as one of your classmates, get out.
So,
But George, that's a prime example. You just
Yes.
he
You
was
just
standing
witnessed
right
it.
in front of you, and you did not do a damn thing.
you were holding him. Hold his paycheck and fire him.
Hold
that
on. Hold on. You were just holding him. You saw him go from 0 to 60 just like that. If he was any closer, he looked like he was gonna like jump at her. I felt like he threatened her.
That's
What do you
In
think
front of
happens in the classroom
everybody.
when you're not?
I want to thank the students who were videotaping what has been going on this week because it educated me. Because this is my neighborhood, this is my campus. But like a lot of people who were in the office that day, yes, let's thank the students for videotaping. But I have a question about my safety and everybody's safety here. Because as I watched the videos, and you witnessed in your office when a person of privilege was challenged about his privilege, and when he lunged at a faculty member who spoke eloquently today. What is going to happen? How are you going to keep me safe on this campus, and how are you going to keep Grace Huerta and our other students here safe when a faculty member or a staff member feels privileged enough to charge and use language that is inflammatory, threatening, and frightening? How are you going to keep me safe on this campus? Because that man appeared to be tall. I don't know, never seen him, but had I been in the room, I would have been very afraid. If he was willing to do that in front of 50, 100 people, live streaming, what is that person willing to do when nobody's watching?
And you in the white shirt, you're going to be held accountable. You stand up in the white shirt right there. You don't get to just act out in front of people like that. That's fucked up. You do not just get to... I don't even know the words right now. Y'all know what he did. Y'all seen the video. Look at him, see his face. You're going to be held accountable to the community. Whether the institution does it or we have to do it. There's the call out. Thank you.
Must be less dark cloud of dust. Okay. So here's this report. Again, this is going to be a long episode. I'm going to go through this. I'll try to cut it down, but this is very important. I think this is very important. It shows some things about Evergreen that we already know, but it shows in greater detail and absolutely public detail if you can find the freaking document that Evergreen is very careful not to release to people that they don't want to have it, even though they are required by law to share this stuff. Anyways, I'm going to go off about that. Eventually, I'll hire a lawyer and get what I am owed as a citizen of Washington State. So this is the investigation report. I'm not drinking beer. This is a La Croix pommel mousse or grapefruit flavored sparkling water. No calories, no artificial sweetener. This stuff is like 20 cents a can. It's all the rage in this part of America. So I had some lime of this stuff. I didn't like the lime, but the pommelmoose is pretty good. Investigation report to Walter Nymek from Patrick Pierce, investigator. Date, December 26th, 2017. Regarding issues raised by John Baumonk and Grace Huerta. So now, Grace Huerta is the union representative. John Baumonk is, I think he's the business and accounting, and I know he's a lawyer. That's what he teaches at the school. And so they both filed a complaint against each other. So the college didn't go after him for pointing his finger, but that's part of this. The document reads, this investigation was prompted by issues raised by the Evergreen State College faculty John Baumonk and Grace Huerta regarding interactions between them in March and May of 2017. In particular, both raised concerns that the other had created a hostile work environment against them based on sex and race, and if you remember the video, also height. There were no witnesses to the events in March other than Mr. Baumonk and Ms. Huerta, while the events in May were observed by many witnesses and were contemporaneously filmed. The following witnesses were interviewed and provided information regarding the issues raised. 1. John Baumonk. 2. George Bridges, the man himself. 3. John Carmichael, Grace Huerta, Lori Maston, David McCavity, Therese Saliba, and Ken Talbot. Interviews were conducted in person on October 9, October 30, November 2nd, and November 6th of 2017. The following report is not intended to reflect all information obtained in the course of the investigation and is instead intended to represent a summary of that information. The allegations were assessed on a more probable than not basis, and this investigator evaluated the credibility of witnesses in reaching the conclusions here. The Evergreen State College did not direct or influence, unlike the external review, who never said that, right? So the external review that I did the Pirate episode about, that I'll have to redo because that's such an important document, but the external review that exonerated George Bridges of doing anything wrong during the protests, actually blamed everything on Jeff Sessions and Brett Weinstein and interviewed only people who agreed with the protest to begin with. They never made the statement in that document that the Evergreen State College did not direct or influence or attempt to direct or influence the conclusions here. If you remember that document, they actually submitted a draft to George Bridges, who then corrected it to what he wanted it to say. That's what the document says, that external review. But this review, allegedly, is not directed or influenced by the college. Standard applied. The issues addressed in this report were assessed to determine if the TESC policies against discrimination and harassment were violated. Under the Evergreen State College policies and procedures, that's italicized, non-discrimination policy and procedure, in parentheses, non-discrimination policy, all personnel and student-related transactions shall be free from discrimination on basis of race, color, religion, creed, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, genetic information, marital status, age, disability, pregnancy, or status as a disabled veteran. The non-discrimination policy applies to all faculty and staff. Italicized. ID. Or ID. Discrimination as prohibited under TESC policies includes harassment against an individual based on membership in the identified classes. So, a protected class is not everybody except the white heterosexual male. A protected class is anybody who's male or female, white, black, brown, purple, gray, red, orange, magenta, heterosexual, pansexual, landosexual, spacesexual, homosexual, undersexual, foamsexual. Any of these attributes are protected. You cannot discriminate based on any attribute. Even if you're married to a dog, you cannot be discriminated against that. That's what this says, right? Just to be clear, that the white man is not the non-discriminated group, right? Any person who's male or female, etc. You guys get that. To violate TESC policy, the conduct must be sufficiently severe, persistent, or pervasive to reasonably expect that it would create an intimidating, hostile, or offensive working or learning environment. Italicized ID. Background facts. This stuff's room temperature, so it foams a lot in my mouth. So if I look a little rabid, it's not because of the facts or the story. It's because of the La Croix. Background facts. John Beaumont and Grace Huerta are both faculty members of TESC. Ms. Huerta has been at TESC since 2008, where Mr. Beaumont joined the college in fall of 2015. Their offices are on the same floor at either ends of a row of 6 offices. This sounds like we're entering into like a Dungeons and Dragons session, isn't it? Exits are located near both offices. Both were consistent that prior to March 2nd, 2017, their interactions were brief and in passing, but professional and courteous. Ms. Huerta is the chair of United Faculty of Evergreen, UFE, right? So she is the chair of the faculty union. That's a big part of this story. The TESC union for the college's approximately 250 faculty members, not that many anymore. Thank you, George Bridges. The position is high-level leadership for UFE and is equivalent to president of the union. Mr. Beaumont is a Caucasian male, while Ms. Huerta is a Hispanic female. As a faculty member, Mr. Beaumont is a UFE member. March 2, 2017. Witnesses were consistent that issues between Mr. Beaumont and Ms. Huerta were based in Mr. Beaumont's concerns regarding the draft evaluation written by Mr. Beaumont's supervising dean in September 2016. In particular, Mr. Beaumont was concerned regarding a reference in the evaluation to the dean's perception that students of color were not engaged to the same degree as their fellow students. The evaluation included speculation as to how to resolve the issue and referenced the dean's mental image of Mr. Beaumont as a white male leading the class. Now, this is a part of Beaumont's official record. This is his 1-year review, and his dean, the guy above him, Greg Mullins, who I think is a great guy, but I find a lot of documents that's rather disturbing about him. Greg Mullins put into his report that as a white man, he should be more attuned to the students of color. He went into a room and called out the class, the protected class of the teacher that he's reviewing, right? To continue with the report, Mr. Beaumont felt the reference conveyed an impression that he was discriminatory in his interactions with and teaching to students of color, which he found deeply offensive. You can imagine. Mr. Beaumont further felt by referencing his race and sex, the draft evaluation violated the TESC non-discrimination policy, as well as the UFE CBA, or Collective Bargaining Agreement of the United Faculty of Evergreen, Article 4, prohibiting discrimination. Under Article 4, UFE members are advised that they may pursue possible violations through TESC policies or other remedies available under applicable law. Mr. Beaumont wanted the white male reference removed from his evaluation and wanted UFE to pursue a grievance on his behalf based on discrimination. Witnesses were consistent that the inclusion of a reference to a faculty member's race and gender in the context of an evaluation was unique in their experience. Just imagine if Greg Mullins had written, well, what I see is a black, transgender, disabled lesbian woman teaching a class with all of her power and discriminating against all these other people. Imagine that. Imagine seeing that in your official review, being called out and identified on your status, not on your performance, but your identity. Administration witnesses agreed with Mr. Beaumont's position that the reference to Mr. Beaumont as a white male was improper and directly related to classes protected under the college non-discrimination policy. As a result, college administration moved quickly to have the language removed and a revised evaluation generated. So they saw that, they saw their mistake, and they went to revise that. However, the UFE assessment of Mr. Beaumont's issue with the evaluation language was different. UFE has a grievance committee that addresses whether to bring a grievance on behalf of a union member. Ms. Huerta is a member of the grievance committee. The committee determined, and witnesses were consistent, that the evaluation was overall very positive to Mr. Baumonk and his performance. In light of the positive and strong evaluation, the committee did not consider the reference to Mr. Baumonk as a white male to be discriminatory or an adequate basis for concern. Now, remember the video where he's constantly called out for being a white male.
And you witnessed in your office when a person of privilege was challenged about his privilege.
But the college, the UFE says, well, it was a positive review, so the white male thing shouldn't really matter. It shouldn't really matter that you are the only person in college history to have his sex and race used in this document. Just forget about that. Don't worry about that. What do you think Baumonk felt about that? To continue, the committee felt the issue did not justify a grievance, and one committee member referenced Mr. Baumonk's concern as noise in a subsequent internal email to the Evergreen State College acting provost and Mr. Baumonk's supervising dean. Now, the problem with this document that's consistent throughout this particular document, the author keeps on writing the TESC, right? To the Evergreen State College acting provost. I was told a long time ago not to mince around with grammar. It doesn't really matter. For the UFE Grievance Committee, the reference to Mr. Baumonk as a white male experiencing possible lack of engagement by students of color was not considered a workplace issue, but rather considered to be a personal performance issue, and therefore not grievable. That's a weird hair to split. This is not a workplace issue. This is a personal performance issue. This isn't about your workplace. This is about your job, right? I guess this is not an issue about where you are, but what you're doing while you're there, which is why you're there. You're in college to be a teacher. That's a very fine hair to split. So to sum up, they're writing a bunch of emails back and forth about John Baumonk. After Evergreen administration revised the draft evaluation to remove the reference, Mr. Baumonk raised additional concerns about records preservation by the college and the timeliness of finalizing the evaluation. Mr. Baumonk was concerned that the revisions to the evaluation were extending the process past the required deadlines. As part of addressing those concerns, UFE and the college agreed to extend the deadlines for completing Mr. Baumonk's evaluation. Documents and witnesses were consistent that communications between the college and Mr. Baumonk regarding grievance assessment and timelines for his evaluation were not conveyed to Mr. Baumonk. So he was out of the loop with what was happening to him and his job performance. He was out of the loop. Mr. Baumonk became frustrated that he was not informed on the status and progress of issues he had raised. Both Mr. Baumonk and Ms. Huerta were consistent that Mr. Baumonk approached Ms. Huerta in her office during the day on March 2, 2017, regarding status of union actions on his behalf relating to his concerns with his evaluation. Both were consistent that the floor was unusually empty and no other individuals were present during their resulting interaction. The recollections of Mr. Baumonk and Ms. Huerta regarding the interaction are substantially different. Mr. Baumonk described approaching Ms. Huerta while she was in her office, asking if he could speak with her and her agreement to talk. Mr. Baumonk described asking about the status of issues with his evaluation and why he had not been copied on communications, and expressed frustrations regarding the union's obligations to represent him as a member. Mr. Baumonk described Ms. Huerta becoming very defensive and hostile almost immediately, which led Mr. Baumonk to want to end the conversation. Mr. Baumonk stated the interaction was brief and lasted no more than 5 minutes, after which time he left. Now, to summarize up to this point, and then we'll get to Ms. Huerta's story, John had a couple issues with the college. One, his evaluation had some funny language in it. He asked for it to be revised. The UFE said, we're not going to revise it. The administration says, yeah, we should revise that. They go on to revise it, but it takes a long time. He is very sensitive to timeliness because he's very orderly minded. And if you will look A lot of the stories that I'm showing you guys and that are being brought up over and over and over again at colleges and at businesses, what we have is a reasonably minded, orderly personality trying to keep things in order and then getting pissed on by the moralists and the people who are hair triggered with this whole aggression oppression thing. Anyways, John knew that there was emails being written about him, so he goes to Grace Huerta to ask to be put on those email chains. That's basically what he wanted from her. This is her story. Ms. Huerta described attending to a busy schedule on the day and being behind schedule to attend a meeting. Ms. Huerta stated that Mr. Beaumont appeared in the door of her office, did not ask to discuss pending issues, and extended his arms to place a hand on either side of the door, effectively blocking her exit. Ms. Huerta described Mr. Beaumont as aggressive and angry, and verbally attacking her for the union's failure to effectively act on his behalf. I've spoken with Beaumont at length. I can't see him doing this. The videos don't show him as this kind of person. They show her as this kind of person, not him. But that's me, not this internal report. To continue, Ms. Huerta described the interaction as lasting for over 20 minutes, with Mr. Beaumont repeating his frustrations over and over at length. Ms. Huerta described Mr. Beaumont as angry and red in the face during the exchange, and eventually telling Mr. Beaumont that he needed to leave, which ended the interaction. Ms. Huerta described being shaken and upset by the exchange. Ms. Huerta considered but ultimately did not seek a restraining order against Mr. Beaumont. So she didn't report this. She did not report this. She didn't get the story out right away. But she considered it. She considered getting a restraining order. Witnesses were consistent that in the days following the exchange, Ms. Huerta discussed it with Ken Talbot, the acting provost, who delegated follow-up on the issue to David McCavity. The resulting assessment did not result in fault being assigned to either Ms. Huerta or Mr. Beaumont. Both did separately agree to refrain from future contact with each other. Ms. Huerta additionally requested that Mr. Beaumont's office be moved, which did not occur. Both Ms. Huerta and Mr. Beaumont are consistent that they did not have any direct interaction with each other subsequently until May 24, 2017, during the meeting of protesting students, faculty, and administrative leadership in the office of President Bridges. Following the May 24th President's Office meeting on May 25th, Ms. Huerta submitted a complaint to the Evergreen State College administration, asserting that Mr. Beaumont's actions on May 24th, which involved him pointing a finger at her who is flapping a piece of paper at him, she says that his actions were a replication of Mr. Beaumont's behavior on March 2nd. If that is the case, then that completely undermines her story, right? Because as you watch the video, he's like, no, I don't think so. Responding to her, who's being the yippy dog, and he's being like, no, I don't think so, right? So who's one more enraged in the footage that we have? All right. The complaint reflects Ms. Huerta's perception that Mr. Beaumont had disputed UFE efforts to obtain extensions for his evaluation timeline, and asserted that Mr. Beaumont had been aggressive verbally and physically toward her on May 24th, after she asked that he relinquish his talking space. Shut the fuck up, white man, basically, right? Not to do the whole race thing. I don't care for that, but this is what it's all about at Evergreen. Now we're going to get into President's Office meeting, May 24th, 2017. How are you guys doing? How's your drink? Did you guys fix a drink? What are you sipping? Well, let's take a little break. You guys tell me right now, what are you drinking in the comments? All right, let's get back to this. B, President's Office meeting, May 24, 2017. The May 24th meeting in the President's office was very well attended by students. Very well attended. It was crammed. It was a fire hazard. Was very well attended by students, faculty, and administration leadership. While the President's office is large and includes room for a conference table, the room was largely filled and crowded with attendees, both seated and standing. From cell phone video taken of the meeting, Mr. Beaumont is standing towards one corner of the room. President Bridges can be observed standing directly behind and to the right of Mr. Beaumont. Ms. Huerta is standing to the left of Mr. Beaumont toward the office windows and the corner of President Bridges' desk. Video shows Mr. Beaumont and Ms. Huerta is separated by most of the width of the office, and several attendees are between them. The door to the office is located between them, to the left of Mr. Beaumont and to the right of Ms. Huerta. I love how he's like, here are where the exits are. That's great. Don't know why. Maybe he was an architect before he became an investigator of college funny business. In the video taken of the meeting, one of the student protesters seated at the conference table is speaking regarding perceived issues. Mr. Beaumont begins to respond, and the student asks that he not cut her off. The student finishes her comments and notes that the attempts to interrupt her comments typifies her concerns with patriarchy and white supremacy. Man-interrupting me. Tacus interruptus. That's the patriarchy. Love it. Love it, Evergreen. Love what you're being taught. Love how you use what you're being taught to shut down actual dialogue and concern. She states that nobody else got cut off. That's not true. People are constantly yelling, constantly through that whole video. I won't show it to you. Maybe I'll link it, but we've all seen it several times. Nobody else got cut off, and Mr. Beaumont can be heard apologizing. The student responds that she does not want an apology and instead wants lessons learned from the protests to be practiced and for the Evergreen State College policies to be followed. She then questions what the Evergreen State College faculty and leadership in attendance are doing to address the concerns identified by the protesting students. Right now, we want everything fixed right now. And as paid employees justify their continued presence at the Evergreen State College in light of the organization's diversity-related goals and policies. She then requests a response from Mr. Beaumont. In response, Mr. Beaumont addresses his personal views and efforts to be supportive of the diversity-related goals and policies. Mr. Beaumont and the student then exchange comments regarding the points at issue. The exchange between Mr. Beaumont and the student continues for approximately 2.5 minutes, at which point Ms. Huerta interjects. The interjection by Ms. Huerta, Mr. Beaumont's reaction, and subsequent characterizations 2 days later on May 26 are the basis for Mr. Beaumont's issues as addressed in this investigation. This investigator's best effort at an accurate transcription of Ms. Huerta's comments are as follows. Want me to read it? Okay. As a faculty member of color, I need to address this issue, and I think you are taking a lot of space. First of all, as a minority, unintelligible, and as a faculty member of color, you personally addressed and challenged me in my office door, saying why didn't we, as a union, protect you when we did our best to defend you and address your concerns, and yet you come to a faculty member of color and charge her for not protecting your needs. So I refuse to listen to you grandstand and co-opt the student meeting. That's what I have to say. Don't you love that? This is my favorite part. And yet you come to a faculty member of color and charge her for not protecting your needs. Now, John Beaumont was called out as a white man, and he wanted that taken out. Just wanted to have a colorblind review. Now she's using her status as a faculty member of color to tell him that her job is not to protect him. His job is just to do what she says. It doesn't matter that she's his union representative. The only thing that matters is that he's a white man and she's not. And so she shouldn't be beholden to him in any way, shape, or form, even if he pays his dues, which I'm sure he does on time. That's the golden gem of this whole thing. To continue, in the course of making the comments, Ms. Huerta becomes increasingly passionate and emphasizes points with strong gestures of her right arm towards Mr. Beaumont. When Ms. Huerta begins speaking, the video shifts to her for the duration of her comments. When she finishes speaking, the video swiftly pans back to Mr. Beaumont. Mr. Beaumont appears to have moved approximately one step forward and is responding to Ms. Huerta with his right arm extended and index finger pointed towards her. Due to vocal student reaction to Ms. Huerta's comments, Mr. Beaumont's comments cannot be heard. Mr. Beaumont can be seen to drop his arm back to his side and take a step back to his former position, then begins to place his right hand into his pocket. Here, let's just replicate that over here. because that's the only pocket that's going to fit on screen right now. President Bridges simultaneously places his left hand on Mr. Baumonk's shoulder and maintains contact for several seconds before removing it. The video does not indicate effort exerted by President Bridges or any other attendees to physically restrain Mr. Baumonk until leaving the room less than a minute later. At the vocal demand of student protesters, Mr. Baumonk makes no other physical movements in the direction of Miss Huerta. After Mr. Baumonk leaves the room, students begin criticizing President Bridges. Go figure. Students immediately characterized Mr. Baumonk as having become abruptly aggressive and angry, moving aggressively towards Miss Huerta, being physically restrained by President Bridges, and having gone from 0 to 60 just like that. Unless you're a Tesla, then you go. The student Mr. Baumonk had previously exchanged comments with states that she feels Mr. Baumonk had threatened Miss Huerta. Discussion of the student issues then continues. How are we doing for time? This isn't going to be so bad. You guys like my long episodes, right? You don't mind hanging out with me? You just put me on play and do your dishes or take a nap. It's all great. C. Longhouse meeting. May 26th, 2017. The student protest resulted in efforts by the Evergreen State College leadership and the UFE to address the concerns raised by the students. Do tell. Part of this effort was development of a memorandum of understanding between the college and the union committing to annual mandatory training for college faculty addressing institutional racism and the needs of disadvantaged and underserved students. Please define what those classes are. I have some great material that will show you exactly what those classes are, explicitly and prejudicially. And I don't know how I'm going to release that because this is a very sensitive document, but stay tuned. Maybe I'll stick it in the documentary that is still forthcoming. 2 days later, on May 26th, the meeting is held for students, faculty, and the Evergreen State College leadership at the Longhouse, one of the best buildings at the college. As part of the meeting, Ms. Huerta discusses and reads provisions of the developed by TESC and UFE. President Bridges then steps forward to make comments regarding the pending issues and resulting actions and intents of TESC in response, and then takes questions from attendees. At approximately 55 minutes into the meeting, an attendee identifying herself as a 1998 graduate questions President Bridges on the college response to the exchange between Mr. Baumonk and Ms. Huerta. The attendee raises safety concerns generally and for Ms. Huerta in particular. The attendee references President Bridges having witnessed in his office a person of privilege who was challenged about his privilege, who then lunged at another faculty member. The attendee then characterizes Mr. Baumonk as feeling privileged enough to charge. Do you think bulls have tourist privilege? That's why they do so much charging? Or do you think that my credit card has Visa privilege for doing so much charging? What does it mean? Privileged enough to charge at Ms. Huerta and use language that is inflammatory, threatening, and frightening, which nobody can make out because everybody else is screaming about him. Another attendee can be heard to say, "He's here." That kid. I don't go after students. Try not to at least, but that kid. He's here in reference to Mr. Baumonk. The speaker continues asking President Bridges how the college anticipates responding to someone who is triggered to the point of wanting to attack somebody and expresses being thankful that President Bridges had his hand on the shoulder of Mr. Baumonk. Referring to Mr. Baumonk, the attendee wonders what he would do if no one was watching, if he was willing to act aggressively when being videoed in front of many witnesses. It's like, basically, this guy's a serial killer, and you could tell because he raised his finger at somebody else. I mean, imagine what he would do if nobody else was watching. Would he, take 2 steps forward and maybe clench his fist? That's threatening, right? I don't think this is threatening, but, is this threatening? How do you figure this whole thing out? How does any of this make any sense? How is this made sense of at all? It's weird because they still think that they're right. Evergreen State College is still doing, not all of them, but the administration and people like Grace Huerta still think that, it's the alt-right that's coming after us. It's Breitbart and campus reform and the haters and the Chronicle of Education and the New York Times and the Washington Post. Yeah, all these haters. It's fabulous. It's fascinating. They've slurped so deeply of this understanding of righting the wrongs of history by allowing wrongs to be affected in the moment that don't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And you think that they would be wise enough, or at least mature enough, to figure that out. It's weird. I don't even know why I even bring it up. I'm tired of talking about it. I'm really tired of talking about it. But it just doesn't make any sense. All right? The student demands that Mr. Baumank stand, and Mr. Baumank complies. The student states that Mr. Baumank will be held accountable, and that his behavior in the president's office was improper and fucked up. The video of the exchange shows Ms. Huerta several rows back from the speaking student toward the front of the room and in a rough line with Mr. Baumank, who can be seen standing many rows back and behind. As the student is speaking, Ms. Huerta is shown raising a fist and mouthing "thank you" to the student. The student continues to call out Mr. Baumank, asks that all attendees look at Mr. Baumank, and again states that Mr. Baumank will be held responsible. What caliber of cojones does John Baumank have to stand up in that room at that time? I'm floored. I would have never done that. I would have been sweating out of my cheeks profusely. Not crying, no, but sweating out of my cheeks profusely and cowering like this. But he stands up. I talked to him about it. He's like, you know what? If they're coming after me, let's just get it over with. That was his attitude. Let's do this. I'm going to stand up for myself. Let's do this. And he turns around and he looks everybody in the eye. That's pretty cool. While Grace Huerta is saying, yes, yes, yeah. So you see the content of the character. The skin doesn't matter. The content of the character. What does that display? Let's look at that. Let's build a case on that. Witnesses and attendants at the Longhouse meeting were largely consistent that the statements by the female attendee and the male student and the singling out of Mr. Baumank had been inappropriate and disrespectful. And you see in the video George Bridges clapping and smiling. Yeah. Now, is he going along? Is he just going along with anything, right? Is he just like, oh yeah, I'm going to clap. I'm going to do whatever you guys want me to do. I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to appear to be doing whatever you guys want me to do. Or does he actually believe what they believe? And either way, callow, cowardly, spineless person. I saw him in the supermarket looking at cheese, and I didn't see him as President Bridges, the one who I criticize him. I saw him as a human being, and human to human, man to man. He's just a person. I don't hate him, but in the role as president, he deserves absolutely to be criticized and deconstructed and then pushed out the door. So I just want to make that distinction between George Bridges the man and President George Bridges, the current and most awful president in the history of Evergreen State College. So, sorry, George, if you ever see this, which I'm sure you probably don't. I should have said hi to you in the cheese aisle and asked you to pass the president's brie, which would have been cool, and I didn't do it. Yesterday, I saw Naima Lowe in the mall, too. I should have come up to her and said, hey, Naima, you want to do an interview? But I didn't. I was just like, that's interesting. You're really involved in your cell phone. And you have really cool extensions on. She's got like these awesome silver extensions that go way down her body. Anyhow. All right. Witnesses in attendance of both the May 24th meeting and the Longhouse meeting were also largely consistent that the descriptions of Mr. Baumank's actions as related at the Longhouse meeting were inaccurate. Nobody corrected this. Nobody stood up for him. Not then. And not till afterwards, when somebody privately in a private room will talk to them. Callow! Absolutely callow. Nobody stands up for him. Nobody stands up for Weinstein. I mean, Mike Peros does. Mike Peros is a stand-up guy. But for the most part, everybody's silent or like rubbing their hands. Or like, oh, well, that's kind of uncomfortable. But let's just keep on going because the students, we're so scared of these students. And we've called the police officers off, right? And we're going to give them all their responsibility, but none of the authority because that's how we roll, right? Okay, let's just go on. Eventually, it's going to be summer. They'll all be gone. And then it's just a bunch of whining on the internet and everybody will forget about it. Well, I didn't forget. I did not forget. And I'm documenting this whole freaking thing. And I have people. You, Evergreen, look at how many people watch this video. Look how many people put up with me for almost an hour talking about you, this document. Look at that. One more thing, then we'll get back to this and we'll wrap it all up. One more thing. I currently, as of this moment, I have 4 times more subscribers than Evergreen has students for the next year. I'm kind of proud of that. And that's what you get for going to Evergreen. You get me, right? So all you guys who show up in my comments say, I would never hire an Evergreen grad, you know what? Suspend that. Go over to my Patreon and hire me to talk more to you, right? Because this is quality Evergreen. This is good Evergreen right here. I represent that. I am not that. There's a lot more very smart people, very caring people doing a lot of great work from Evergreen, right? And we're all being thrown under the bus. And I'm not doing it. Because even though I'm criticizing Evergreen, I'm showing the fruits of Evergreen. So, you're in a bind. I really want a faculty member to come after me again. That'd be great. I mean, I feel really bad, but then it'd be great to see if they actually have anything to go against me with. Anyhow, enough with Benjamin Boyce. Let's finish up with Baumann. Witnesses were consistent that both Mr. Baumann and Ms. Huerta have strong personalities that can be taken negatively at times in interactions. Yes, John Baumann, I believe I already said this, he has a certain personality that can turn people off because he's very factually oriented. This is accounting. This is how to run a business. And what kind of person do you want teaching business and accounting but that kind of person, right? What kind of person do you want teaching engineering but Stuart Card, who I interviewed a few days ago, right? Who else do you want coding in a basement but James Damore? Who else do you want teaching science but Brett Weinstein, right? And what are we doing with the masteries? What are we doing with the people who have the capacity to be masters but not necessarily always the most flowery of speakers, the most compassionate and nuanced of speakers? I'm not saying that those people are. I'm just saying that sometimes when you privilege facts in your daily life, you can trample feelings because they're subsequent. And what happens when the people who are basing everything on feelings shoo away the factuators? We're fucked. Sorry, we're screwed. That's what we are. Witnesses were consistent that both Mr. Baumann and Ms. Huerta have strong personalities and can be taken negatively at times in interactions. Both can be perceived as intense and resistant to moving off positions and discussing points that are important to them. Witnesses were consistent that Mr. Baumann can at times be perceived as physically intimidating because he has a body and he's tall. I mean, how do we solve that? Do we saw everybody's legs off or do we give everybody stilts, right? Does everybody just need to have like the same body shape, right? And the same facial skin tone, the same eyes, the same amount of perceived beauty or ugliness, right? And we just wobble around. We are all the same. There's no offensive can be taken because I am just the same as you. And then we can go do our things and feel so good. You know what? I'm going to say if we all become the same, nobody's going to feel anything awesome anymore. Awesomeness is going to be diluted. I'm really going off here. Let's wrap this up. The concerns of Ms. Huerta. Ms. Huerta perceived Mr. Baumann's behavior on March 2, 2017 as violating the non-discrimination policy. All right. Hey, could we talk about my email? You're violating the policy! Ms. Huerta felt Mr. Baumann could have approached others in the UFE regarding his concerns. She's the president! You went to the top! If you don't want to be on top, if you don't want people interacting with you that you represent, don't be in a position where you represent people. Don't do it. That's your fault. It's not his fault. Other UFE leadership has offices in the same building as Mr. Baumann and Ms. Huerta. While their descriptions of the conversation differed, Ms. Huerta and Mr. Baumann both recognized the interaction on March 2, 2017 had been negative for each of them. Both Ms. Huerta and Mr. Baumann, as well as other witnesses, were consistent that following the incident, both agreed to avoid interaction with each other. I feel like we are just repeating ourselves. Maybe I should skip to the end. This investigator concludes. The March 2nd, 2017 interaction reflects a one-time incident during which each individual perceived the other's demeanor and reactions as unpleasant. Beyond the perception of Ms. Huerta, there is no evidence to indicate that Mr. Baumann was motivated by Ms. Huerta's membership in protected classes when he approached her in her office. He is not that kind of guy. Vouching for him, maybe I shouldn't. But the investigator said he didn't approach her because of her class or her race or her sex. He approached her because of her position, right? And go back to what's the difference between the workplace and the performance and the class of the person performing in the workplace? I don't know. That's weird. This investigator concludes it was reasonable for Mr. Baumann to approach Ms. Huerta as a member of union leadership to ask after issues relating to his request for a grievance, the union's representation of and communication with him on the issue, and his frustrations with the union in the process. This is particularly so as their offices were physically located on the same floor and physically proximate to each other at either ends of a row of 6 offices. As a result, this investigator concludes that while an unpleasant interaction for both Ms. Huerta and Mr. Belmonte, the interaction on March 2nd, 2017 does not establish a violation of the Evergreen State College non-discrimination policy by Mr. Belmonte. Belmonte, cleared. I'm going to say this later on, but I'm going to have a centrist salon in 2 weeks at an undisclosed location in Western Olympia. If you're interested, message me, let me know, find me on Twitter, or use YouTube's absolutely lame messaging system. Get a hold of me. You're invited. Love to have you come and chat. Maybe we'll get a cool speaker. I can't promise anything, but you'll be able to meet with me in the area. To continue. Regarding the May 24 President's Office meeting, witnesses were generally consistent that Mr. Belmonte's comments were perceived as excessively long, 2.5 minutes, and came across as an effort to boost the perception of himself as an ally to the students and their concerns. Basically, shut up, Whitey. Video establishes Mr. Belmonte was directing his comments to a seated student and not Miss Huerta, and he did not face her or look her in direction when making them. All right, he's just gonna, this investigator is very thorough, and we're gonna skip ahead because we saw what happened. Let's go down. This investigator concludes that at the time of the May incidents, Ms. Huerta maintained the perception that Mr. Belmonte had lacked a basis to raise protected class issues and approach her with regards to issues relating to and deriving from his draft evaluation, which reference him as a white male. This investigator concludes this perception motivated Ms. Huerta's comments to Mr. Belmonte during the May 24th President's Office meeting and her encouragement of at least one of the speakers making negative comments to and regarding Mr. Belmonte on the May 26th Longhouse meeting. This perception violates the plain language of the TESC non-discrimination policy, as well as a significant body of legal precedent addressing the issue. Huerta! Boom! Witnesses observed that this investigator concludes that Ms. Huerta's comments during the May 24th President's Office meeting were intended to and did undermine Mr. Belmonte to the students in attendance. Witnesses observed, and this investigator concludes, that the statements by attendees to Mr. Belmonte at the May 26th Longhouse meeting mischaracterized his actions on May 24th, which served to incite attendees to the point that a witness describes physically moving closer to Mr. Belmonte to assist Mr. Belmonte's escape if student emotions continued to escalate. So basically, Huerta put John in danger, and George Bridges is seen clapping along with students. When at least one person in the room is like, if things escalate, we're going to get in trouble. George Bridges is just happily playing along. Can you believe that? How big of an indictment do I need to make of this man as incompetent to be president of a college? Speaking of George Bridges, how big of a splash do I need to make? Who do I need to contact? Who needs to see these videos? Maybe just me going through and doing the documentary will get it all sorted out, and this can be over with. And I will have done my part in assuring that Evergreen recovers from the atrocities of the past 16, couple years, actually. While only 2 incidents, to continue, are in question here for purposes of this investigation, both were severe, occurred during a time of heightened tension and student emotion, and immediately resulted in profoundly negative and hostile student response towards Mr. Belmonte. Both were based, at least in part, on his having previously pursued protections based on status as a Caucasian male. And both involved actions taken or encouraged by Ms. Huerta. Now, what college is the college that's teaching all students that every institution in America is systemically racist, right? Evergreen College is teaching Evergreen students that everything is systemically racist. What is the only evidence of systemic racism that I have from Evergreen State College is that, yes, it is being systemically racist against white men. It is. Another document, the only assault last year on campus against a white man. Brett Weinstein, a white man, even though he's Jewish, but they still call him a white man, white privilege, right? systematic discrimination against protected classes at the college. It's bending over backwards to embrace this diversity equity thing, which proves to you and to me that equity is not about equity. It's not about equality. It's about turning the tables of oppression, and actually not even turning the tables, but creating oppression to solve perceived oppression. That is what it's doing. It's being systemically oppressive in its nominal pursuit of anti-oppression. And I've said that, and I saw this coming, and here's another document. This is a legal document that says this. And I feel good that I'm not wacko, that somebody from Seattle got paid thousands and thousands of dollars to say what I've been saying. Right? And all that money that went to him proves something. All right. Along with the profoundly negative student reaction towards Mr. Baumank on May 24, the statements by Ms. Huerta directly led to the female attendee and male student negatively mischaracterizing blah, 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 blah. This investigator is troubled by the mischaracterizations of Mr. Baumank's May 24th actions by the female attendee and male student at the Longhouse meeting, and Ms. Huerta's contemporaneous encouragement of the male student. However, beyond this encouragement, there is no evidence that Ms. Huerta planned, organized, or otherwise involved in the statements and actions of the female attendee and the male student. As a result, this investigator determines that the events at the Longhouse on May 26th do not establish a violation of the Evergreen State College non-discrimination policy by Ms. Huerta. So Ms. Huerta exonerated for the 26th issue, but blamed for the 24th. What is going on with John Baumank? You know what? I said several times that I would go through his review, but this episode's long enough, and I want to exonerate him, and hopefully he will let me interview him and you guys can meet him in person, or if not, I will vouch for him being a pretty stand-up guy. There we go. I have a sore throat now. Good night.